Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm glad you're interested in the snow and ice control operations that we provide for the city of Milwaukee. I first and foremost want to start with our COVID-19 protocols and workforce impacts, because as the pandemic affects the community at large, so does it affect our essential workers. And we have worked very hard since the start of this in March, and very much over the summer, it has been laser focused to make sure that we have operations for COVID safety in place. And you can see some of the list of things that we have done. We had our first operation this past weekend and got to put some of those in practice. And we'll have to make some adjustments, because as you can imagine, when you have over 150 people showing up for an operation at one time, how do you limit contact? How do you keep them social distance? We did a good job, but there were some glitches that we're working through because it is not intuitive to do some of these things. And our staff is very much interested in maintaining a healthful workplace. So it's first and foremost in our mind this winter and always. So Megan, if you can advance. This is the job at hand. This is how big our city is. And that third bullet point on the top, 7,000 lane miles, it's a Herculean task to clear all of those lane miles. And when I tell new drivers how we get 7,000 lane miles is, if you look at, for an example, Capitol Drive, you have your median, your left lane, your right lane, and your parking lane on either side of that median. All of those lanes add up to our 7,000 lane miles. So it's a large endeavor for us to clear the streets of the city of Milwaukee. And on average, we have 47 inches. We have generally 30 general ice control operations. So that is our most engaged type of snow and ice control operations. And on average, we have 4 plowings in winter season. Next, please. This is our mission. Of course, we want to be rapid but calculated in our response to snow and ice control events. Bare pavement on arterial streets, and I have a slide to show you what that looks like, as well as residential streets that are drivable at slower speeds. And of course, we want to keep the city open and safe for all modes of transportation. Next. So the upper left-hand slide is an arterial street. And those streets, as you know, are collector streets. They have more traffic. The people come out of their neighborhoods and usually go to an arterial street to get to wherever they're going. They're higher speeds. On this particular street, it's posted 35. People might be going in excess of that. And you can see on this particular slide, in the distance is a salt truck, and they're bumping up against that curb to keep full lanes open on our arterial because of the high impact to traffic. So that is our standard, excuse me, of bare pavement, but not only the city of Milwaukee, that is an industry standard to have bare pavement on things such as highways, freeways, and main arterials. On the lower right side, that is a residential street, and you can see it has a little snow impacted to it. The split between arterials and residential, arterials are about 1/3 of the mileage of our streets, residential are 2/3, so near 1,000 miles of residential streets. They're lower speeds, generally 25 miles an hour. They serve the residents who live on the street or in that neighborhood, so they're not collector streets. So a little snow impact is acceptable, and you can drive on that safely at 25 or lower speeds. You can make those adjustments. And so there again is the standard for residential streets. Next, please. So this is how we do this job. We have 350 pieces of equipment. The list of 6 tanker trucks. We use tanker trucks. We have one that's 1,800 gallons and 5 that are 925 gallon. And those trucks are used exclusively for anti-icing. We have 113 salt trucks that we deploy for each operation, and 20 miscellaneous trucks, various sizes of trucks that will have salt capabilities as well as plowing. If we need to go to a plow, we use our garbage trucks, and we have 110 of those at the ready, 36 sidewalk tractors, and this is a picture of a sidewalk tractor here that they're cleaning the corners. And we clean those corners, not every operation, but we clean them when we do a plowing. So by ordinance, it does say that the adjacent property owner is responsible for clearing the sidewalks on their property, as well as the corners if that abuts their property. However, if the city of Milwaukee places an excessive amount of snow at those corners, as an example would be a plowing, then it's our responsibility to do the initial clearing. And then after that clearing, the property owner takes care of that. But we do it with these type of sidewalk tractors. And then we use city end loaders to load salt in our vehicles. And we hire an additional 57 or so private end loaders. And those end loaders are engaged during a plowing to clean things like cul-de-sacs, the last 40 feet of a dead end, some of the turn lanes and the noses of boulevards. So they are more agile and they can pick up snow and move it and place it. And so we utilize them for those little more tricky attributes of our streets. With regard to personnel, at any time during a big operation, we can have 800 plus people working. And it shows you the breakdown of those people that are very integral to getting the job done. Next, please. Salt. So that is what we use as our first line of defense with our salt trucks, obviously. You can see the average use of salt over the last few years. We want to use as little salt as possible to be as effective as possible. And in the picture, in the salt dome, the white salt is your typical rock salt, sodium chloride, and that's what we generally use for most operations. The green salt is our treated salt. It is treated with magnesium chloride, has a little rust inhibitor to be gentler on our equipment, and an organic material to make it sticky. It is higher power type of de-icer, so we only use the treated salt if pavement temperatures dip below 15 degrees. And then we need a faster activating salt. So the rock salt, the white salt, would still work at those temperatures. It would just take longer. And so that's why we punch it up with going to a treated salt or a hot mix. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, next, please. So brine. We utilize brine for two things: anti-icing, I talked about the tanker trucks, and pre-wetting. So anti-icing, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide, but let's talk about pre-wetting. We use a pre-wet of our salt. So we manufacture our own brine. This is a brand new brine manufacturing piece of equipment at our 14th and Walnut location. So that stainless steel hopper on the top, we would put our rock salt in. It's mixed with water. It's computerized. It creates brine at a 23.3% salinity. And we use it for these two type of operations. But pre-wetting is on all the salt trucks, you will see white saddle tanks along the salt hopper in the back of the bed of the truck. And we fill that with brine, and that is used to pre-wet. So when we drop the salt during the operation from the back of the truck through the spinner, there's nozzles in there that will spray the salt with the brine solution. And that does two things for us. It activates the salt so it works faster, because probably after this past operation, you've walked on sidewalks and seen salt just laying there. Salt will just lay there. It doesn't matter how warm or cold it is. It needs water to activate. And then, so we pre-wet it, and then it starts activating sooner, and then it prevents it from bouncing so much. So if you're driving down the road at 25 miles an hour, which is the 25, 30 miles an hour is the optimum speed for a salt truck to apply salt, and you just drop dry salt, a lot of it bounces, and studies have shown that almost 70% of it can bounce underneath the parked cars as it's bouncing. Where if you pre-wet it, that lessens it to about 30%. So you still have some bounce, but it certainly is lessened, and it makes it more effective on where you need it. And the below numbers just show the increasing amount of brine, how the liquids program has been more and more incorporated into our operations over the years. Okay, next slide, please. So this is our storage tank. These tanks are in the same garage facility as the brine machine I just showed you. So the smaller, squattier tanks are filled with brine. The larger, taller tank is calcium chloride. Calcium chloride is also a heavier duty de-icer, just like the treated salt. So we can go either way. We could operate and put down treated salt if pavement temperatures are below 15 degrees, or we can use a little calcium chloride mixed with our brine in those saddle tanks to treat the salt. The combination that we're going to use is a 90-10, so 90% brine and 10% calcium chloride. And so we are going to be moving in that direction to utilize what they call in the industry a hot mix, where you add a little heavier duty chemical to your brine to burn through the snow faster and to use when pavement temperatures are pretty cold. So we're going to be evaluating our treated salt and our hot mix and see in the future if one or the other is more effective in our operations, or if we utilize both and it's just at different times when we utilize them. So next slide, please. So this is the equipment we use for anti-icing. In the upper right corner is the tanker truck. That's one of the 925-gallon tanker trucks. It has a spray nozzle. So behind those mud flaps at the back are 8 spray nozzles, a bar with the nozzles pointing directly down. So it has mud flaps on either side of those spray nozzles, so it's not affected by the wind. And we can lay down those beautiful 8 lines on the road, and that provides that salt brine there. Other operations is the truck on the left. We call that a hybrid. That's a salt truck. They can carry a larger amount of brine with those white saddle tanks, and it's 540 gallons that they can carry. And they also have the spray nozzles behind the dual axle and before the spinner. So they also have the spray nozzle. So we have 27 of those. And as we buy new salt trucks, they are all set up in this manner with the hybrid. So at some time, in the future, we could put all our trucks out to anti-ice, not just the 27 hybrids and the 6 tanker trucks. The small pickup truck that you see is a prototype. That's not actually our truck, but we have outfitted heavy-duty pickups with this type of brine equipment, and it can be set in and taken out. So we have installed it in one of our trucks, and it's to do the protected bike lanes, because as you can see on Kilbourne and Locust and Holly Road and North Avenue, they're a narrower lane for us to anti-ice, but we want to make sure that bikers are just as protective as the traffic, and so we will do anti-icing of those surfaces as well. Next, please. So this is the results of our anti-icing. On the left is Kilbourne Avenue, and this was in advance of a big snowstorm, and it was a nice, dry, sunny day, and the brine just dried so beautiful in those nice white, bright stripes. It won't always dry that way. If there's a little humidity in the air, you might not even see that the brine stripes are there. But on a nice, clear, dry, crisp day, that's what they dry to. And then on the right, you can see how the brine worked for a dusting of snow that we had in the residential streets. So years ago, back in 16, we only did anti-icing of bridges. We had the 6 trucks only, and we only did bridges. And we did that a lot of times in the early season, like October, early November, when you get frost, because the bridges freeze first, as you would expect, because they're elevated, most of them. There's air circulating all around, so they are susceptible to freezing first. And we have a lot of bridges in the city with the viaducts, the bridges, the overpass. So we have to be very mindful and cautious of taking care of those bridge decks. And since 2016, we have added more and more to our anti-icing operations. We started with high impact arterials the next winter, and then we have expanded right along. So now we are in a position we can do the entire city. And anti-icing will provide us 2 big benefits. One, it can take care of a dusting of snow or some frost, but the other thing, we can use it in advance of a big snowstorm, because those bright white stripes will help prevent the snow from bonding to the pavement and allows us to mechanically plow and move that snow and clear it easier than if we didn't have the brine layer down first. So the liquids program is becoming more and more ingrained in our system, and I think it provides us another good opportunity, another tool in our snow and ice control operations. With regard to anti-icing, some of the things that prevent us from conducting anti-icing: time. If something is going to kick up soon in a weather pattern that wasn't expected, anti-icing needs time. We need at least 8 hours to do the bridges, and we can, if we're going to do the entire city, we need 3 days to lay brine down through the whole city. So we need time. And then the other thing is, if it comes in as rain, it can wash the brine away. Now, this past operation, we did do anti-icing of the bridges and arterials, even though it did say it would come in as rain, because there was such a high uncertainty with the past forecast that we were afraid that could it come in as sleet and not come in as rain. And so we took a chance and we did our anti-icing of the bridges and some of the main streets. But generally, if the system comes in as rain, it doesn't help us because the rain will wash away the brine. So that's a negative to doing our anti-icing. Okay, next slide, please. General ice control, I told you that this is the most frequent type of operation that we do, and we use it with these trucks in our fleet. If we are just going to salt the bridges, we use 18 trucks. It takes us about 3 hours. And if we're going to do the entire city, we call in the 113 trucks, and we have A and B teams. So A team is generally sanitation, and B team is generally forestry, and then we also have people from infrastructure, from streets and sewers and electrical services that also help drive the trucks as we need to. But the main teams are sanitation and forestry, and they will rotate in 12-hour shifts. So the A team will go out first, they'll get their 12 hours, and if the operation goes longer than that, we will roll over into the B team, and those drivers will be the relief and take the operation from there. These trucks are very versatile because, as I mentioned, the newer ones can be used for anti-icing, they can be used for salting, and then they can also start the plowing operation and be very effective in plowing and cleanup. They do have what is called an underbody. You'll hear some people say an underbelly plow. So between the front and the rear axle, there is a hydraulic plow that is the width of the truck, 10 feet long, hydraulically operates, and it does a really good job of scraping snow up to about 1 inch. So if we're salting, but the snow rate is pretty active and we can't keep up with just the salt, we'll lower those underbody plows and scrape it to the curb. It's angled to scrape that snow to the curb, and then we can salt behind that, and that is a very effective technique for those minor snows. If the snow is going to be more than 1 inch and getting to a 2-inch accumulation, then we'll mount those front blades. Those blades weigh about 3,500 pounds, and they hang off the front of the truck 6 feet. So it's a big piece of iron hanging off the front of the truck and makes us less agile. So we don't send those trucks out with a front blade from the get-go. We wait till when it's the proper time to do it, because if we don't have the front plow blade on, we can hold more salt in our hopper. We can hold 2 scoops of end loader salt or 6.8 yards of salt in our hoppers versus just 3 yards of salt in the hopper, because the blade weighs so much, we don't want to overload the trucks. So we calculate when we need to put those front blades on and get the trucks back out to do more plowing. Next slide, please. Sidewalks, I mentioned the corners previously, but it is by ordinance that homeowners have to clear the snow from the sidewalks adjacent to their property no later than 24 hours after the snow is stopped. So we do issue to our contractors are all clear for the city-owned properties so that we get out there and clear the snow within that 24 hours. And there are violations and charges for people who fail to comply with that ordinance. So it's very important to our pedestrian traffic that all sidewalks, crosswalks, and corners are available for snow clear transportation for themselves. Next slide, please. Plowing. This is a big operation for us. Generally 4 times a year is our average, and we start to call these the big trucks, the packers, garbage trucks, in when we're getting about 4 inches of snow. Now that is not a definite with 4 inch. It could be 3.5, it could be 3, it could be 5. It depends on the consistency of snow. If it's wet and heavy, we might call the garbage trucks in sooner than if it's a light and airy and blowing around type of snowfall. So it all depends. But generally speaking, if you're going to have 4 inches or more of snow, we're going to call a general plowing, and that means we're calling these garbage packers in to assist. They're heavy-duty trucks. They weigh 39,000 pounds. That front blade on that truck is 12 feet wide. It weighs 4,200 pounds. So it's a big piece of iron on the street, and we don't want to call them in too soon because it'll tear up the trucks if there's not enough snow to push, and also it'll tear up the streets. So it's a calculated time on when they are called in. They are operated by the sanitation operator driver workers. So those are the people that are trained to drive the garbage trucks. And it's a big effort to do snow clearing in a city of this size. So on average, we're talking 16 to 24 hours to clear streets. And it all depends on the type of snow, how much, how fast we got it. If you see a forecast that says the rate of snow is 1 inch an hour, that's a lot of snow coming at us in a quick amount of time. So all of that is calculated when we are planning and conducting a snow operation of any kind. As you look through a plowing, besides the garbage trucks, we do use end loaders, as I mentioned before. Garbage and recycling collection will be suspended most likely because the people who do garbage and recycling collection are the same people who are going to be in the plow trucks. Generally, only time you won't see those services suspended is if the operation is on a weekend and the drivers can get enough rest before the Monday morning garbage and recycling collections would begin. Cleanup, we have the corners we talked about. There's 42,000 sidewalks with corners and crosswalks. The city has 59 miles of non-accessible sidewalks, meaning there is nobody else but the city to take care of them, and we clear those. And then the 3,400 bus stops. And that clearing is done overnight by contracted end loaders. And it's done overnight because the end loaders have to pick up the snow along the curb of a bus stop to allow people to get from the sidewalk onto the bus, and they have to deposit that snow. And so it's done by an end loader overnight because it doesn't impact traffic as well. So next slide, please. And as Brian stated, the operation that we conduct for snow and ice, and especially when we get into a plowing, is very contingent on compliance with our winter parking regulations. So I'm going to turn this over to Parking Services Manager Tom Woznick to talk more about winter parking regulations. Thank you.
Tom, you're going to need to unmute yourself. You can start over.
Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time this morning to learn about snow and ice operations and our winter parking regulations. My name is Tom Woznick. I serve as the Parking Services Manager for the city. First, take a little bit of time speaking about specific winter parking regulations that apply from December 1st to March 1st. So the first of those is no parking on our through highways and bus routes between the hours of 2 to 6 a.m. We do have a map located on our website at milwaukee.gov/parking. These through highways carry the majority of traffic volumes, which include emergency vehicles in the city. In the winter months, they take on additional importance since they are the first streets treated and are plowed during inclement weather. It's especially important that these streets are effectively plowed and kept as wide as possible. Having vehicles parked on these streets overnight is not conducive to keeping our roadways clear of snow and ice. The other one is specifically posted no parking December 1st to March 1st signs. So these typically restrict parking on one side of the street or the other, and it's very important that the public pays attention to that and parks opposite the no parking signs. These are typically narrower streets, usually 30 feet or less, in which there's not enough room for larger vehicles to get down and through during the winter parking months, especially when there might be some snow or ice on the roadways. And then we encourage everyone and the public in particular to visit milwaukee.gov to sign up for text alerts. That is an option and something we have over 10,000 people signed up for. Move on to the next slide, which goes over specifically the snow emergency regulations. So Laura mentioned when we get 4 inches or more typically, but that can depend, of course, but a snowstorm in which the mayor of the city of Milwaukee declares a snow emergency, there are specific regulations consistent with that declaration. The first is the alternate side parking rule is required from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. citywide unless otherwise posted. So again, it's important to be aware of signage because that signage always applies. But everywhere else where signage doesn't apply and doesn't allow parking, alternate side parking is required between those hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. The through highways and bus routes also do not allow parking, in this case from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which gives our staff and those trucks more time to be able to access and clear the snow and ice. And then because of the importance of the snow emergencies and clearing that snow and ice and keeping our roadways safe and the public safe, there are progressive fines for violations during snow emergencies. So the first violation would be a $50 citation starting in winter time. So now once we declare that, a second violation in the same winter season would be $100, and third and subsequent violations would be $150, plus those vehicles are eligible to be towed. And again, we encourage people to visit milwaukee.gov/parking for this and other regulations. The last one we'll spend a couple minutes on is just our general night parking regulations, because these are important for compliance of our general night parking rules. So alternate side parking is required from 2 to 6 a.m., except in areas where two-sided parking is allowed. That information is also on the map. That includes the through highway map on our website at milwaukee.gov/parking. There's no parking in the public portion of an alley between the hours of 2 to 6 a.m. and a night parking permit is required between the hours of 2 to 6 a.m. And lastly, vehicles must be moved every 24 hours. So vehicles need to move around, and there is an exception to that in these exception streets. That applies every 48 hours, but vehicles must be moved at least 24 or 48 hours to make sure that they're being moved around and people are monitoring their vehicle and making sure it's safe and available for use. And again, I encourage people to sign up for text alerts at milwaukee.gov/parking and any and all information related to winter parking rules, night parking rules, and any other parking rules. And then I want to thank you and turn it back over to Brian Deneve for any questions or other information.